What's up, everybody? It's Jared with Capture the Magic. And with a Disney World vacation getting more and more expensive over the years, there's lots of outlets that have talked about the Disney prices have pushed out the middle class, which I would argue is the group of people that helped build Disney World into the destination that it is today. And Disney seemingly since 2020 has been focusing on higher income earners out there, but they never really said anything publicly to kind of, reiterate that too much. They kind of use the verbiage of appealing to everyone and trying to have, everyday families have a great experience at Disney World. But at a recent summit, Disney CFO Hugh Johnston actually said that higher income guests are the main consumer for Disney World. That is where they're focusing, as well as on price increases. He actually says a lot of very interesting things during this summit. So we're going to read through this article, give some thoughts on all this, and see what this looks like for Disney in the coming years off of some of the things that were said during this summit. So again, it says Disney CFO highlights higher income guest as main consumer. Disney CFO Hugh Johnston says higher income guests are the key to the success of the Disney theme parks. Johnston spoke about growth in attendance during the Wells Fargo 9th Annual TMT Summit. Johnston said, our consumer tends to be at the higher income levels, and those consumers continue to do well. So we certainly broadly feel good about where the consumer is. Now, we know off the latest earnings call that Disney's attendance was down 1%, and they saw a 5% increase in revenue, because yet again, price increases are helping them increase revenues even if the attendance isn't there. And Johnston explained essentially that flat attendance was normal in a year without any major new additions. That in years when Walt Disney World or Disneyland added new attractions, you'll see attendance jumps. But when they're not, attendance is basically about level. He added that over the long run, Disney balances attendance growth with pricing growth, which is a fancy way of saying price increases. Although in any given year, growth could be geared towards one versus the other. He says, despite flat attendance, actually it was down, Johnston explains that per guest spending were actually quite good last year with domestic growth of 5%. He said Disney felt, quote, very, very good about that. Now, his quote right there is interesting about saying when there's nothing new opening and this is why the attendance was flat. But they did say things were new. They had new parade. They had new shows. And these were things that supposedly were going to bring people over on top of massive discounts they ran last summer, as well as all the verbiage out there about Epic Universe's opening was going to be a rising tide lifts all boats scenario. So obviously, when you look at the fact that Universal was up 2 straight quarters of 20% increase in revenue, and we don't know the attendance numbers, Disney also saw an increase of their revenue, but their attendance was down. I think that's pretty safe to say that is not a rising tide lifts all boats scenario. Let's say Universal's attendance was up 10, 15%. If it was a rising tide lifts all boats type of scenario, Disney should have been up even 1, 2, 5%, whatever it is. That would be a rising tide lifts all boats situation. Being down 1% in attendance is not that. So they can, of course, they're going to come out here and kind of, try and make that sound much better. And they're not going to come out here and say that we were disappointed by this year. But obviously, that scenario that Bob Iger and Josh D'Amaro and Hugh Johnston were out here talking about before Epic opened did not come to fruition. Now, these are some very interesting comments. The moderator circled back to the question about higher income consumers being the core consumer for Walt Disney World and Disneyland, asking about the infamous yield management approach to improving margins. Johnston explained that the company very much focuses on how to generate incremental revenue via ticket prices, as well as on food and beverage, merchandise, and upcharge offerings such as Lightning Lane and VIP tours.
There it is.
That is a pretty astonishing quote there, because what they're essentially saying is one of their main focuses as a company is on price increases. It's not, you'll notice he didn't say guest experience or providing great value or helping families create memories. A huge focus of the company is on price increases. Now, that is not shocking for me to hear. That might be shocking to some people, but I think most people will just be like, well, yeah, duh. But them openly saying this now, I find very interesting, because obviously this has been their focus. This is how you have 1% decrease in attendance, yet you still have an increase in revenue due to price increases. And obviously, it being a huge focus of the company, in their own words, this is something they're going to continue to do. And it's not about increasing the value and justifying these price increases. It's just simply focusing on the price increases. So he added that the team has gotten increasingly better at getting that yield up, particularly in years where we're not adding capacity in a particular park. That's going to be the primary growth driver, is all of that yield focus. So essentially they're saying, yeah, when we're not building more stuff, we're going to raise prices. And even when we're building more stuff, we're still going to raise prices. They're just going to raise prices. I mean, that's just built into essentially the ethos of the company now when it comes to the parks. Hugh Johnston also went on to say, he added that there are always attendance jumps when new attractions are added. The last ride to open at Walt Disney World and Disneyland was Tiana's Bayou Adventure in 2024. The newest attractions and entertainment at Walt Disney World are Disney Villains Unfairly Ever After, The Little Mermaid, A Musical Adventure, Disney Starlight Dream the Night Away Parade, and the reimagined Test Track, none of which draw crowds the way that a new ride would. The only new attraction at Disneyland is Walt Disney A Magical Life. But again, these are things that they said were supposed to drive attendance. Like on top of Epic Universe bringing in more people, these were supposed to be the things that were going to bring people into the parks last summer. And I remember saying the entire time, like, shows and parades are not going to do that. Like, this is also why they ran a bunch of discounts. So they're kind of trying to rewrite the history a little bit here, saying that we didn't have anything new open. Well, you didn't have anything new e-ticket attractions open. You did have one reopen with Test Track. You had Tiana's Bayou Adventure last year, which you would assume if that ride was a huge success, you would still be getting attendance growth off of that. Look at Pandora, what it did for Animal Kingdom. When that opened, you had multiple years of attendance growth from people checking out that new land. So this is kind of actually them saying Tiana's Bayou Adventure it's kind of a dud. Like, it's not drawing people in, which is not unexpected. It's a rethemed old ride. That obviously wasn't driving attendance, nor were the shows and parades this summer. So they're kind of trying to act like, well, we didn't have anything new open, so this is why attendance was flat and actually down 1%. But that's not the case. That's not what they were saying, and that's obviously not what was going on. They had these things because they couldn't turn around things quick enough as an answer to Epic Universe as the things they're currently building. So they felt this was going to be enough, or hopefully this was going to be enough to entice people this summer to come over to check these things out. And clearly that didn't happen to the level that they were insinuating that it would. Now, another interesting quote that he had that we'll do a separate video on, because that's a whole other thing, was talking about this dynamic pricing. And he basically confirmed that dynamic pricing is coming to the domestic parks, and this is surge pricing or airline-style ticket pricing for theme park tickets is going to make its way to the domestic parks. And essentially, he said here that dynamic pricing is a way to, basically create more revenue into the future. It's going to be a way to squeeze more money out of the people coming to Disney World under this dynamic pricing model. So not only are just general ticket prices going to go up, food prices, everything in between is going to go up. A lot of this is going to depend on when you buy your tickets and this, how popular of a day it's going to be in this. And they have said previously, this will be like by the hour that this will change. They're likely to increase revenues quite a bit from just offering that in there. So even if their attendance is down or flat going into the future quarters, they're probably still going to show more revenue growth just off of further squeezing less people coming into the parks. Very similar to, say, what Hollywood and the movie industry has done, which is higher ticket prices, less people going to movie theaters. And we've seen this in lots of different areas, not only Disney World or vacation spots, but just in general of trying to charge more for the same or less of an experience than it used to be to a smaller group of people. And I think it's summed up really well at the end here on Disney Tourist Blog, which I completely agree. And I've been saying this for multiple, months and years about this topic, where he says, we'd also once again reiterate that it's likely that Walt Disney World and the travel industry as a whole will continue to aim up market. All the data and earnings calls and everything else since we last tackled this topic in the spring suggests that this is the most viable business strategy in the near term, especially with rising economic uncertainty and declining consumer confidence. If there is a recession or downturn, Disney and other companies seem to believe that the best way to weather it is by seeking out affluent customers. For our part, we continue to believe that Walt Disney World's bread and butter is the middle class. That even though wealthy guests are not the company's core clientele in the long term, Disney will nevertheless continue targeting that segment with new and differentiated product offerings because that's clearly where the money and growth potential lie for now. But I would argue, I think that is their core clientele now. I mean, they said they say like it historically has been the middle class, but I mean, I think obviously that they've been pushing the middle class out. Even The Street, which is an investment website, has an article here: Disney theme parks quietly abandon middle class travelers. So Disney is not for the middle class anymore. I mean, their new clientele is these high income earners because that's what they're chasing. That's what they want to go after. But he has a point here that I've reiterated before, and I completely agree with this. This upmarket strategy will work until it doesn't. There are countless reasons as to why that could happen, but it could pose problems for the company. The potential for these issues increases in the long run as consumer perceptions increasingly view Walt Disney World as a destination for the wealthy. Completely agree. And I've seen that too. In the short term, this clearly has worked and will probably continue to work for some period of time. But in the long run, I don't think this strategy continues to work to just raise prices without offering more perks along with it, just in perpetuity. Like there is a ceiling on this somewhere. And I think Disney is hell-bent on finding out what that ceiling is. But there is a ceiling somewhere out there where even the wealthy no longer feel it's a value to go and go to Disney World with the current offerings that they offer with the increased prices. Once that middle-class reputational damage is done, it's hard to undo. This is precisely why we've repeatedly emphasized the importance of improving the guest experience and satisfaction, as well as the hugely negative long-term ramifications of pricing out families and alienating longtime fans. Rich Americans have more money to spend on fancy one-off rite-of-passage vacations, but it's still middle-class families that are the lifeblood of Walt Disney World. I completely agree with that, and I think by Disney shunning the middle class, chasing after these higher earners, not only do I not think that strategy in the long run is one that's sustainable, while this has worked in the short term, undoubtedly, they have made a ton of money from charging for what used to be fast passes, increased ticket prices. I mean, now we're over $200 for most day tickets, talking about any theme park destination out there except for Animal Kingdom. But the brand damage by doing that is one where you're losing out on generational passing down traditions of going to Disney World. That's how Disney benefited from that, as families would go, they pass it on to their kids, they go with their grandkids, all these things. If that gets interrupted, you lose that compounding interest of people passing on that tradition down to their children and chasing this higher income group of people in the short term. So yes, I think undoubtedly you'll make more money in the short term, and they have. This is not a sustainable strategy of just continuing to raise prices without having any focus on the guest experience, the value, like the things that Disney was known for. Essentially, they have cashed in to just try and just push all their chips in and harvest all the profits they can in this moment with increased competition. Again, I think the way that this is all heading in the next 5 to 10 years is that Universal and Disney are co-leaders in the theme park industry. So while they're raising prices higher than they ever have before, they also have more competition than they've ever had before. And so this sets up a very interesting scenario, because if Disney just had no competition, these price increases wouldn't really have, I don't think, as much of a focus, because there'd be like nothing else as like going to Disney World. But when you have a big competitor that has a very similar offering, and I think in many ways has strengths that Disney doesn't have, immersion that Disney doesn't have, and Disney is taking a lot of their inspiration from what Universal's been doing, this is where it all gets really interesting, because even the high income earners at one point may decide it's more value to go to Universal or go to another destination. So and where's the brand loyalty? The middle class had brand loyalty to Disney. There's no indication that these higher income earners do. And again, they have options. They can go to Europe. They can go basically anywhere they want to go. So if they don't have brand loyalty to Disney and they no longer think it's a value, they're just not going to go. And then where is Disney left to do in that scenario? And I think that's a very interesting thought exercise to go down of, if they've alienated the middle class, if they've even priced out or the value's not there for the wealthy group of people, what is Disney left to do? And I think that is a scenario that could play out in the next 5 to 10 years, where they have to focus on more of the guest experience, bringing value back into a vacation and focusing on those things. And a Disney vacation was never cheap, but I think it also has a sentiment amongst a fan base when you recognize that this place you enjoyed going to, that the focus is no longer on your experience or providing a once of in a lifetime trip or a one of a kind type of experience where the focus is seemingly is just to make more money, pricing things more, and the little things that made Disney World the vacation destination that it became are no longer cared about. And this goes into like spreadsheet management where you just everything has a price associated with it. It needs to show a profit revenue. And when you nickel and dime everything, and somebody said this very well one time, they said, I no longer feel like a guest, I feel like a customer. And I think there is a difference in that when you're talking about Disney World, whereas you felt like a guest. It was a special experience, and people are very aware of how much of these price increases are hitting them at every turn you go down. And I think these are the things that start kind of racking up in people's heads, talking about going on a vacation, and not only just the actual economic expense of it, but also how it makes you feel. You feel like you're just being, you walk through and they're just trying to squeeze as much money as they can out of you. And you're very aware of that. Before, it was almost effortless. People would spend money and it was just because it felt good. They loved being there. But when you become very aware of exactly a company's main, like Hugh Johnston said, a main focus of theirs is price increases to increase revenue and focusing on the higher class, it's very obvious that that is where their focus as a company is, and it's not on providing the guest experience, which was great, and that was what made Disney World into the destination that it has become. And I just think they've lost focus of that, chasing after this short-term money. And this is going to be really difficult to walk into a boardroom and say, hey guys, I know we've made a ton of money in the last 5 years, but this strategy won't work forever. And they're just going to laugh in your face and say, our revenues are up. We just made $10 billion. What are you talking about? And like I said in the article, it works until it doesn't. And a lot of times with these companies, they think that this will never end, that they're just going to keep raising prices. This could never happen to us. We're Disney. And there's been lots of brands that have also thought that. I think people back in the day thought Sears would never go out of business. I'm not saying Disney is going to go out of business. What I'm saying is every business is susceptible to consumer sentiment and guest behavior and spending habits and customers and competition. And Disney is not any different. They have a massive brand. They have tons of decades of generations of people that have gone to the parks that have created these things. So they have a ton of headwind. But I think when you play this out in the long run, there's lots of issues that could pop up here, and just seemingly increasing prices as one of your main focus points as a company is rather short-sighted, and not saying along with those. And that, mind you, in this article, there's no mention of guest experience or creating memories or all the things that Disney would always talk about, creating magic for guests. There's no talk of that. So while I'm not surprised to hear this, and probably most people watching this video are not surprised to hear him say these things, I think it is rather telling that they're just openly talking about these things now because it's just so common knowledge now. I think this would have been shocking 5-7 years ago to hear them talk like this, but not as much today. But either way, that's going to be it, though, for this video. So if you like this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel as we do lots of coverage here of Universal Studios, Epic Universe, Disney World, and pop culture. And let us know in the comments, what do you think about all this? And until next time, we will see you in the parks.